Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Idaho House Republicans podcast, where you get to learn a little bit more about the legislators that you've sent to the State House. And today we're super privileged to have Representative Stephen Miller with us, and he is in Legislative District 24, Seat B. He's in his second term, but he's served 3 terms because you also served, you served 3 more terms.
I served 3 to start with.
Right, so you have
out
5 total.
Second, yep.
Wow.
My 10th year.
There you go. So welcome to the Idaho House Republicans podcast, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Victor. I appreciate it.
So let me tell everyone a little bit about Representative Miller. He was born in Wendell, Idaho. He graduated from Camas County High School. He has his BS in Ag Engineering from U of I.
I'd just like to make sure everybody understands that's a Bachelor of Science.
Bachelor of Science. Yeah, right. There you go. He was on Camas County P&Z, Planning and Zoning, Camas County Commissioner for a while. How long were you Commissioner?
6 years.
6 years. He's a third-generation farmer and rancher in Camas and Blaine counties. His specialty is hay and grain, right?
Yeah, we do.
And you also have a calving operation too.
We do organic hand grain because it's a specialty market, makes a little bit better market for us at our elevation and production. It's easier for us to do organic. And yeah, we have a cow-calf operation.
How cool is that?
My brother-in-law, Dave, takes care of.
All right. You are all in on the farming here in Idaho. And then you are you have Cheryl as your dear wife, she's just awesome. And you have 3 children and 1 granddaughter.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Let me just adjust that mic a little bit. Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's first talk about Representative Miller, Legislative District 24. What is it like, and what do people care about in your district?
Okay, well, it's an interesting district because when you get on the north end of Camas County on the east side, you're actually just over the hill from the headwaters of the Salmon River.
Okay.
And then you run all the way to the Nevada border. So you go from the mountains to the kind of desert, you get into low precip area down there. So we're primarily an agricultural area, particularly Camas County. We used to have a little logging. That's gone away. There's very little mining exploration done there. So we're farmers and ranchers. Quite a bit of retired people, oddly enough, like it up there. It's a beautiful place to live. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes we get a real heavy winter and they go away for a few months.
Down to Arizona.
Yeah.
Or Southern California, yeah.
And so you get into Gooding, and then you begin to get into dairy country down there. Of course, it's basically agriculture with some cheese manufacturing, processing the dairy. And then as you go further down into the Twin Falls County area, then you really get into food production, food processing, major agriculture. And between Gooding, well, I think Gooding may be the biggest dairy county in the state. If it's not, that's number 2. So you got dairy cows in Gooding, you got dairy cows in Jerome and in Twin, and so that's a big part of the agricultural area in there. And then as a result of that, you got Chobani, you've got the manufacturing, the cheese plants, and so food processing in the Magic Valley is a big deal. You take that, Twin Falls, Gooding, Jerome, Cassia. Cassia is one of the biggest, it's the biggest ag production county in the state. So stuff works back and forth clear through that Magic Valley.
So you geographically, you cover a large amount of territory.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are the main issues for your farming communities and the dairy, and what issues do they want you to advance here in the State House or look out for?
Water, of course, dollar-wise, is the biggest issue. Well, in some ways, the biggest issue in Idaho in terms of what the potential is if you actually have a call, like they talked about doing before. Mm-hmm. So the things that we did, getting that $30 million set up on an ongoing basis to take care of the call there and to begin to do some things to actually fix our water supply.
Right, recharge the aquifer and the investments they've made there.
So there's 2 schools of thought. There's some people that really want to build dams, and dams are great, but they're really difficult to license. And I think the only real prospect we have probably is Teton, and they're still a lot of memories of that. There's also a process of raising dams like Anderson Ranch Dam. That is getting set up. And there's a couple other existing dams that we could talk about raising, need to talk about cost. But I am a huge fan of aquifer recharge because it's not you can make it a more complete fix. Mm-hmm. Dams are great because you can store some water and it's available when you need it, which is really important. If we get our aquifer recharged back to the levels of about somewhere in the 90s, we didn't have any water calls till the Hagerman area came up with those water calls. And the reason for that is when we started irrigating in about 1905, 1910, somewhere in there, when they built those dams, then it was all flood irrigation, row crop irrigation. And that water would go out and it would infiltrate into the ground.
Right.
So basically, you could figure about half the water that went out sooner or later went into the ground. And so it built that water table up. Mm-hmm. That whole Snake River plain up there, clear on down to Hagerman. And at some point, I think the numbers are like 18 million acre feet that got to in the early 50s. And then they started drilling wells. And then a little later in the 60s, we started seeing wheel lines, and then we started seeing pivots, and we saw more wells. And so that 18 million feet began to drop down to about 8.5 million acre feet. Wow. Then that's when we were down to the water levels where the calls started to come. So what happened when we had all that water is that anybody that wanted a permit, sure, we got water, you can get a permit. Well, what happened was the state actually gave more permits than there was available water.
Wow.
It was fine then. As that water level went down, then some of those wells dried up, some of the springs down in the Hagerman area, and that's when the calls.
And remind people, when you say there were water calls, what does that mean to, like, some people may not know exactly what that means.
Okay, so our water law is basically first in time, first right. And so if you have a senior right and something happens up the creek from you, mm-hmm. then you have the right through a process of having them shut off their water so that water comes down to you because you have a senior right.
Okay.
But what happened with the Eastern Idaho call is the water users in the Magic Valley area got short on water. And so they called on the upper users. And it becomes a very complex system in terms of surface water and groundwater. And the most of the call was groundwater because of all the wells.
Mm-hmm. And this was an issue that our lieutenant governor got involved, right, and helped negotiate kind of a truce between all the parties that seemed to make everyone happy.
Yeah, he got the people to talk to each other. I mean, they spent like $30 million fighting each other.
Oh,
I think finally the reality of it was, we need to figure this out.
Right. You could have taken that $30 million and given it to the state to recharge the aquifer.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that is there's an awful lot of those guys are on both sides of that issue. Mm-hmm. They got surface water, they got wells, and it was very difficult for them. And I think finally Lieutenant Governor was then speaker, and he finally got the guys in the room so that they started talking, and they worked out a settlement. And then that didn't work out so well, and they worked out another settlement. And I think this latest settlement is going to last. I think they solved a lot of the issues that were there. But just to finish up on the aquifer recharge thing, mm-hmm. It costs a lot of money to get the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Because we typically have maybe 3 or 4 years out of 10 where we have enough excess water that we can really begin to get water out into the area where it needs to be. And quite a bit of that work's been done. And from my perspective, we need to do about half again as much work as we have done already to begin to build that up. I think we need to have a target date of maybe 10 years or something like that and then hope we get some good winters. We certainly didn't get one this year.
It was very wet, but not snow. Just a lot. We had a lot of rain early, but then we didn't have a lot of snowpack.
Yeah, I think a lot of areas had well above average rain.
Let's hope that wound up into the somehow
But their
got into
total
the.
precip is down. I know
Gotcha.
in our area up at Fairfield, coming off the last 2 years that we've had, we needed to have about 10 inches of water, preferably a bunch of it in snow, to really soak that up and get in the ground, get those big snow drifts up in the mountains, that kind of thing.
So when you talk, so water's a huge issue in your district. Are there any other big issues that they send you to the State House to defend or advance?
Well, the Lava Ridge was a big deal, and
All right.
we've got that under control
Yes,
for a while.
that's done.
I think an awful lot of it is just don't get in the way. Let us do business.
Right.
I think right now our ag is doing well. I think our food processors are doing well. We have.
I heard the beef industry is
I've got 13
good.
school districts.
Oh, wow.
I got a bunch of school districts.
So public education's
So
important.
public education is a big deal, and we have CSI, College of Southern Idaho,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big deal. The community colleges do specialized work that nobody else does, and in a lot of ways, the best dollars we spend in education are at the community college.
Agreed. We have a special community college apparatus here in Idaho.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, you obviously love public service. You've been on the Camas County Planning and Zoning. You've been a Camas County Commissioner for 6 years. You've been in the legislature for 10 years. What is it about you that you feel like public service is such an important part of who you are?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think one thing, you see things happening that you don't really agree with, and rather than standing on the sideline criticizing, I think we have a responsibility as citizens, as community leaders. If you don't like the way it's working, you think you got a better idea, I think you're obligated to try to go make that work.
Was there an issue that, like, I'm coming off the sideline? What was your come off the sideline moment?
There was an issue in the county that was going on that I wasn't in agreement with. I'm not going to bring that up because there still might be some sores out there.
But you got off that's the whole point, is you got off the sideline.
That's what got me going. I got in a race once. I got beat the first time, and I've learned how to communicate better and make my issues heard better, and came back and won.
So Representative Miller, remind people of the committees on which you serve.
So I'm JFAC, Joint Finance and Appropriations. I'm vice chair there. I've been on that committee all the time that I've been in the legislature.
So all 10 years.
And I'm on Agricultural Affairs and Resources and Conservation.
So you have the perfect mix for you.
Yeah. When I first came in, the speaker gave me those committees, and I ran in what was then Legislative District 26, which was Blaine County on one side and Camas, Lincoln, and Gooding on the other.
And then with redistricting, you've
Right.
yeah.
So just to tell you how close that county was, I won 3 times there, and the total of those wins was less than 1,000 votes.
Oh, added together cumulatively.
My biggest win was 368 votes.
Wow. Out of how many? And just proportionally.
Oh,
Turning 15,000 votes.
9,000,
Oh, wow.
12,000,
Yeah, so that's
somewhere
not a lot.
and then my slimmest one was 124.
Wow. Hey, so let's talk about, if you don't mind, could we briefly talk about JFAC? Because I want to talk to you mostly about nuclear energy. I want to talk to you a little bit about mining, because that's kind of a wheelhouse for you as well. But so we have 5 bills that are going to go to the Senate, 5 to the House. Tell people what has come out of JFAC so far and when you expect them to actually be voted on.
Yeah, well, there are 10 what they call maintenance bills, or kind of the base, with the things that you've done in the past accumulate, and that's like your business or your farm,
Keep the lights on.
every year that it's gonna be.
Predictable.
And so those bills, there's 10 of those, and typically they split them 5 to the House, 5 to the Senate. There's an awful lot of, maybe angst
Right.
would be the best word. People are concerned about some of the cuts that have been made. Some people would like to say, well, let's just take it out of the rainy day funds. It's not very much money. Let's do that. But
it's not raining.
procedurally and structurally, that's not the right thing to do.
Right.
That's like borrowing money out of your savings account to make your house payment.
Right.
You can do that a few times, but pretty soon you don't have any more
And that's a
savings.
bad habit.
And then
Yeah.
if something happens to your income, then you lose your house.
Right.
So the way to handle these things, of course, is do a balanced budget. And another thing people struggle with is the difference between one-time money and ongoing money.
Right.
So in the illustration of the savings account in the house, the savings account is one-time money. You can spend it once. The house is ongoing money. It's going to be there every month. And we have the same thing in the state budget. We got to make sure that we cover ongoing money with ongoing money and one-time money with one-time money.
And remind people, we hear the concepts of direct funds and general funds. So for the people that aren't part of that world, what is the difference between a directed fund and a general fund?
It's dedicated fund.
Oh, dedicated fund. Thank you. Sorry.
So what we work with, our big concern this year is general funds. General funds are the taxes we collect.
Okay.
So it's going to be like corporate tax, individual tax, sales tax, or some miscellaneous tax. Dedicated funds might be general funds that were put in a particular fund to pay for things, or it might be licenses or
Gas
things that
tax,
people
would that be
buy.
one?
Yeah.
Okay.
It can come from a lot of different places. And then federal funds, of course, come from the federal government. So we're not really hurting on dedicated funds. We're not hurting on federal funds. What has happened to us is general funds. So when I talked about sales tax has been stable, individual income tax has been
good.
stable.
Yep.
What happened is with the BBB, the big tax bill, the feds.
The big, beautiful bill.
Yep. That had a component in it for corporate, can't think of the right word.
Yeah, not research and development, but research and
to take those
ideation
deductions.
now, whatever it is. Yeah.
And they could go back 5 years and pick that up.
Right. And we decided not to conform with that.
And
correct?
that was quite a bit of money in there, and some of that was hard to define. So some of that was left out. And then when we went ahead and put it back to the beginning of 25, then that rearranged, especially in corporate world, how they decided to pay and when they decided.
Right.
So that we were short 20 or 40 million at one time, but November came up, December came up, January's close.
Right.
I think it's going to come back to the revenue line.
Right.
But we don't know. We can't bank on that.
Yep.
So we need to make sure that we're covered. We need to make sure that as we look at that forecast, that we're going to be all right setting the end of 26, which goes to July 1, and then fiscal year 27, which is July 1.
So you talked about angst, some of the angst that I've felt, and I don't know if that's as accurate or not, but it's just the method of how you make cuts. Some people say, hey, let's be surgical. Let's go and look at every program and really dig into it and cut, as opposed to just saying, like, we're just going to cut 4% across the board. And I know you're not cutting like ISP, you're not cutting corrections, you're not cutting education. But some people think that the scalpel is a good method, and some people think like, nope, just let's go across the board. Philosophically, since you've been in here for 10 years, do you have a side that appeals to you more than the other?
Well, actually, they're kind of the same.
Okay. Tell us about that.
The axe is you have to take enough out of that budget to make it balance.
Right.
And then your work groups, your members have an opportunity to work in those individual budgets and say, I think this is more important than that is.
Okay.
You had a governor's recommendation that took stuff out, and you may agree with that recommendation or not. And then you need to figure out, well, if I If I think this is more important than that, then I want to make that trade. And then you need to have everybody in the work group agree with you or bring a motion yourself. And then, of course, you have to have JFAC agree with you. So there is the opportunity for the surgical. I think there is a kind of a misunderstanding of how you actually make that work because it takes a lot of cooperation. And then another part of that's kind of difficult is you have different work groups working on different budgets, and it's hard for them to see across the budget spectrum to know if that particular cut over there actually hurts more than this particular cut over here.
Right.
That's one of the things I'm kind of struggling with now, and that occurs in any kind of formulation we've ever had.
Right.
Because you got a group of people working on different budgets, and they have things they like, things they think are very dear to them, and they're all that way.
Right.
And being able to coordinate that across in a down year like this is difficult. And then the other thing is most of them have never been in JFAC on a year when you had to make cuts.
Right.
So there's kind of a mental adjustment.
Right.
And it's a lot easier for me because I've seen it before, and I have a way of doing my own prioritization. I've worked on a deal to try to get the list of budgets I thought that were the most critical, I thought. And I always do it in terms of health, safety, and then the cost, If you have for example, on Pearl board, they wanted to cut a position, I think it was $59,000 or $89,000, and then we figured out that within a year that was probably going to cost us $200,000.
Right.
Well, obviously,
Right. Penny wise, pound foolish.
That one you got to take care of. But if you stay honest to your cuts and not try to dip into rainy day or something, then you have to figure out something else that you have to cut that's not as important as that is. So you have to try to prioritize it.
So let's now pivot to nuclear energy, okay? So in Trump in May of 2025 issued 4 executive orders to try to create a new renaissance in nuclear energy across the country, very high priority for the Trump administration. There are 17 labs in the United States, national labs, and our Idaho National Lab is the only one that's really dedicated to nuclear energy. It also does cybersecurity, which a lot of people don't realize. But just how do you see the potential for nuclear energy in Idaho, and do you think that we will be able to be a leader, a national leader in it? Representative Miller.
Yeah, I've been pushing this with a good friend, Lee Barron, for a long, long time. We started, when I got in the legislature in 2013, we were trying to get the legislature to look at thorium molten salt reactors. And we worked on that, and we never could get anywhere. And now, all of a sudden, we have data centers.
Right.
And now we have acceptance by Google, by Meta, by these multi-billion-dollar companies who see these opportunities with AI and the other things.
Right. And they need the power.
And the race, to a degree, we're losing with China. Mm-hmm. And so now things have come alive, and we have all these opportunities, but we're still playing catch-up. The Texas, as far as I know, they're kind of the lead in what's going on. That ALO, I think it is, AALO.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're based out of Texas, and they're looking at building 10-megawatt stackables. And what that means is if you need 10 megawatt, you get 1. If you need 50 megawatt, you get 5.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then Texas Christian actually built a facility down there to construct molten salt reactors.
Oh, interesting.
SMR.
Interesting.
And, yeah. So we're playing catch up there. Now, the good news is we have the lab, and there's supposed to be 3 different reactors that they may get lit up this next summer.
Right, which they call critical, right?
Yeah,
it could be critical.
Yeah. And
which means the model is being tested, and then it could be done at scale if the experiment goes properly.
Yeah.
It's not like there's going to be 75 megawatt plants done by July, but it's rather 3 models that are actually producing nuclear energy, but they are scale at very small scale,
Yeah.
but proving that the technology works.
they're test reactors.
Right.
That's where you get the wrinkles figured out.
Right.
And then I don't know that anybody really knows from the time that they get the test reactors going, from the stuff that they see happening with that, to where we're at. That company is actually going to get to the point where they can start constructing.
Now you
at
are
scale.
you are part of in the House and the Senate. There's an energy caucus, and you've been meeting fairly regularly, and that deals with all of our energy sources. But there's been a particular emphasis recently on nuclear energy. The House and the Senate, I think the Senate through Senator Lent, has basically started a joint memorial between the House and the Senate, try to send a signal to the government and to industry that Idaho is in the game, right? Tell us a little bit about what message do you think we should send as a state to industry and to the federal government to let them know that we are very serious about participating in this nuclear renaissance?
Well, the easiest and quickest is regulatory control, and most of that is out of our hands.
Mm-hmm.
What Senator Lent was really focused on this last summer is spent fuels. We have all of the Navy spent fuel that they have produced is in Idaho, and then some other. And INL is, I think, the foremost of the labs working on processing spent fuels. In a fuel rod reactor like that, I think you only use 3 or 4% of the uranium that is in there, and then it's got to be processed or kind of put together,
right,
again, if you will, to be able to utilize that. Now, we have a huge opportunity there, and I think we're behind it, and I think there's plenty of support to do it, and that won't be a problem for the lab to do.
And so just so everyone knows, the experimental breeder reactor 2 produced quite a bit of fuel in its day, and that the Oklo facility, which was launched in September of last year, is using HALEU, which is related to the fuel that's being recycled from EBR2. So like you said, we do uniquely have some fuel that we can recycle in the near term. So it seems like you believe that lane is a very logical lane for Idaho to exploit, which is the recycling of fuel. Tell me about your thoughts there.
Yeah, there's two parts of that. One is we're in a position to recycle, as you say, that fuel so it can be used in existing reactors and also in new fuel rod reactors. But I believe the future in this is molten salt, and more specifically thorium molten salt. And from my understanding, we can actually utilize spent fuels in that molten salt mix a lot easier than when we can reconstructing fuel rods. And I believe the molten salt reactors, the next 50 or 80 years, we're going to use fuel rod reactors until we finally get one of these guys actually constructing the molten salt reactors. China's doing it big time. They're planning on 30 gigawatt reactors. India has built. Apparently, India is the leader in molten salt technology, and we're behind them.
And what is the burden? Everyone talks about water, right? Is that technology better in terms of water usage than maybe a light water reactor, or are we going to find out as we continue to just experiment with these different types of approaches to nuclear energy?
I think the bottom line is how much money you spend, what is water worth? If water's cheap and available, then you're going to use more of it in your cooling process. If it's expensive or limited or regulated, you're going to spend the money to use less.
Right. Good point. The interesting thing is that when I got to say hello to the CEO of Oklo at the groundbreaking, and I asked him, Representative Miller, I said, if we took the total potential of all the nuclear energy that's stored at the facilities around the country, because they are stored at the nuclear sites, and you took the energy that we've got in Idaho, I said, ballpark, what do you think in terms of the oil? How many barrels of oil equivalent is that? And he said it was 1.2 trillion barrels of oil. Can you imagine that? That's a lot. That's a lot of oil.
I don't know what that is in kilowatts, but
That's a lot.
Let me make another comparison for you. In a thorium reactor, it's a breeder reactor. So you only need to have uranium to start the reaction, and then it produces at the end of
More
the day,
fuel than it uses.
U-233,
Yep.
and it will run on that. Now, the source of thorium, some people will say there's enough thorium in Idaho to run the U.S. for 1,000 years. Other people will say that it could run it for 100,000 years. So when we talk about fuel sources and long-term production, that we will eventually land there because it's going to be cheaper and the life of it's going to be longer. A molten salt reactor runs hotter, so you can actually get more production out of more energy out of the fuel that you allocate to it. There are just all kinds of advantages in it in terms of safety and a lot of other things we could talk about.
The bottom line is, though, that Idaho should be front and center, and that our lane, right now, the Senate and the House are going to declare our interest in recycling fuel and being part of that cycle, which is really exciting to watch. So we'll continue to watch that. Let's last topic, just talk a little bit about mining. I just had the privilege of speaking with Representative Boyle, and she was saying that you and her kind of putting your heads together on mining issues. So maybe give us a little insight on what you two are cooking up.
Well, Representative Boyle has been a long time in natural resources.
Right.
And I have been around it, but I never crawled right into the mining deal. So when President Trump got in the middle of this and we started talking about rare earth metals and strategic minerals and all of that, and then you start looking at Idaho, and we have all that. We have at least $1 trillion worth of metals in Idaho. All we got to do is go.
We have gold too.
And so as he opened the door with that, and particularly with Fast 41 and the regulatory process, that was always the holdup. It took 25 years to get a permit from the feds. And so we got to talking, and the first thing we did is we got a bunch of the mining companies together and said, what does it take for you guys to make this work? And they all said we need to have a regulatory process that we can get through without taking us a long time so that we can bring that capital in and put it to work. And so we're working on integrating Idaho's process with Fast 41 so that they will work together. There's some stuff you can do while the feds are still working on it and vice versa. So we need to integrate that process so that we speed that up as much as possible. And then that puts them in a much better position to want to risk capital.
Right.
Mining,
You want certainty. That's
mining
the whole
is
thing.
an extremely expensive
To start.
proposition.
Yeah. So are you thinking about running some legislation before we go sine die this year? Is that the idea?
I'm hoping that we get to that just so that we'll have a start. I hope that we get something put together that will kind of give us a structure to work on and work through, because it's going to require some budgeting to get people in place to be able to do this kind of work. And two, one of the main things is you have to have an administrator or director coordinating this process so that everyone knows when they're up and that they know they need to work on it and get their work done. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at like Nevada, for example, with a lot of the bonding and stuff that happens, some states you work with one agency, you get that done. Work with another agency. Nevada set up a one-stop shop that way. So every bond that has to be done, they can be handled in that area. And then that allows the company to organize their end of it on the financial end to get all of that done at one time. There's just simple, logical things like that we can help set up in Idaho. And we're not going to recreate this or anything. There's states that do well, Nevada, Montana, Wyoming. There's parts of their statute that we'll wind up using because there's parts of it that really
because it works.
Yeah. So get
Godspeed on that.
Place, yeah.
I mean, but if we can really start tapping into the nuclear potential that we have and the mining potential we have, the state's future, which is already bright, our economy is one of the best in the nation, will certainly be one of the absolute best ones, shining examples in the entire country. So thank you for the work you're doing on both of those important areas, which will really drive the future of our economy, right? So without energy, we don't have the AI, the data centers. So there's a good chance that Idaho is going to be in the center of AI, nuclear, mining, all very important things. Last thing I want to mention to you is, I know education is very important. You talked about all the school districts you have. What do you think about how do we train our high school kids, our middle school kids, our college students, so that when they come out, they're ready to jump into these industries like mining, like nuclear, like AI, operating things. So talk a little bit about your vision there.
Well, I think the first thing is to help kids figure out what their bent is, what their natural abilities are.
Right.
And that can happen pretty early. That can happen like 6th grade, 8th grade, and begin to help them explore some of the things that they're just naturally interested in.
Right.
And then our basic education, I think we've made a lot of progress on the last 2-3 years.
We have.
Our CTE, the Career Tech, has opened some really, really cool opportunities for high school kids.
Yep.
And then continuing on with that, getting into community college. And then the next part of that, of course, is a community college, the specialties that can be done there, the individual training. At CSI, when the dairy guys put in all of that stuff, there was new technology. They went to the community college and say, hey, would you set us up a program so we can train guys to do this?
That's exactly how it should work.
And so now we're going to see this mining. Perpetua is going to get started, and their biggest concern is hiring people that can do it.
Right.
So there's 300 jobs there, and these are jobs like operators, on skilled operators on particular equipment. And a lot of us just electricians and plumbers and
welders.
It's all of the typical things that you need, just kind of like Micron needed. But you're going to need them up there in that area to do that.
Right.
So there's 300 jobs there. The next one that's coming through is 150 jobs.
Right.
So then we need to go to whoever it is, whether it's CWI or whatever, and say, okay, we need this many operators. And I believe that's what these guys will do, is they'll work with the community college and say, this is what we need. And the college will design that program for them. And under that scenario, then the college can get a different pool of money to help them train for those jobs. So there's opportunities like that.
Right, and industry is investing in the students that will then eventually run those industries. And as Governor Litt always said, his dream has always been to keep the Idahoan in Idaho, right? He wants everybody to stay. He doesn't want everybody to get trained and then leave the state, bring all those assets into the state. And this is a way to do it. So I really appreciate the time you've taken to spend with us. And thank you for joining us here on the Idaho House Republicans podcast. We've been spending some time with Representative Stephen Miller, and he represents Legislative District 24, Seat B, and he's served 5 terms here in the State House, and you've been a real treasure to the state, and thank you for your continuing service. And before we sign off, as we always say, God bless the great state of Idaho, and thank you once again, Representative Stephen Miller.
Thank you.
Sunrise on the Snake River Plain, red, white, and blue in the window pane. Work boots dusty from yesterday, but we're back at it the Idaho way.